Well, good Monday morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston, and I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. I had a very relaxing weekend for a change. That is just almost unknown for me, but I got some things accomplished on one of my old car projects. I've got a little '65 Ford Falcon station wagon, and managed to do some rust repair on it, trying to get the little car ready to sell. So yeah, it was really a good weekend. Hope yours was great as well. Well, we're looking at the eschatology of the parables of Jesus. We're not looking at every single parable, since some of the parables are not strictly eschatological, but nonetheless, we're trying to focus on that. We come now, I've been spending a good deal of time on Luke chapter 15, which introduced to us the concept of the age to come. And I really appreciate all the wonderful comments. Well, we've gone through the parables now in Luke chapter 15. We've come into Luke chapter 16. And now we come to the story of the rich man and Lazarus. And what's interesting to me about this is how controversial it is concerning the question, is the story of the rich man and Lazarus really a parable? It seems like people get just, up in the air if you even suggest that the story of rich man and Lazarus is a parable. I would suggest to you, number one, it is a parable. That's where I'm at this time. That's my AT&T position. Okay. And I see no reason to reject the idea that it is a parable. Now, some people say, oh, but wait, Jesus said there was a certain man. Really, that doesn't determine anything. And the very fact that we are in a context, in chapter 14, parable, chapter 15, parables, chapter 16, parable, and now all of a sudden we have the story of the rich man and Lazarus. It would certainly be disjunctive if all of a sudden Jesus told this non-parable in this context of one parable after another. Secondly, the statement that says there was. Well, if you go back into chapter 15, Jesus says, or he talks about, there was a certain shepherd, That is to say, what man of you having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave? In other words, he draws from the real life situation. But it's a parable, just like the woman with the coin. He draws from a real life situation, but it's a parable. So there's nothing to be gained, nothing to be lost for having a huge controversy about whether or not Luke chapter 16 and Lazarus and the rich man was a parable. Notice that in chapter 16, he said to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward. Now what's interesting, this is introduced by the statement that this is a parable. Now once again, my question to you is, could Jesus be telling a parable that is drawn from real life? Well, of course. That's the very nature of a parable. When in Matthew and in Mark, there was a man who went out to sow. Well, did they not sow? He's drawing from real life circumstances. And by the way, in different parables of Jesus, we're just emphatically told, he told a parable, and then it says, there was a certain. For instance, Luke chapter 18, he spoke a parable to them, saying that men ought always to pray, saying, there was in a certain city a judge. See, distinctively a parable, explicitly a parable, introduced by, there was a certain. So the terminology of saying, there was a certain rich man or there was a certain poor man, that does not demand that it was a real life situation as opposed to a parable. So once again, I am of the opinion at this time that Luke chapter 16 and the story of the rich man in parable was in fact, and the story of the rich man and Lazarus was in fact a parable. But it raises the question, what would be the main storyline? What's the main lesson that we see in Luke chapter 16, even if it's a parable or if it's not? All right? I would suggest to you that following the storyline of Luke 15 all the way in through chapter 16, that we find a beautiful, beautiful storyline. Number one, we find grace. There's Lazarus. Number two, we have a role reversal. That which was lost is found. But in Luke chapter 16, what do we find? We find one who was privileged, in a position of privilege, now being cast out. And by the way, as an introduction to the rich man and Lazarus, after they heard Jesus speak about the unjust steward who is about to be cast out, what do we find? Well, we find that the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, see, that goes back to the unjust steward. The Pharisees, who were lovers of money, also heard these things, and they derided him. That's the lead-in to the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Here is the rich man, clothed in purple and fine linen. Now, there may be much more than that going on, and we'll cover that. But the point of fact is, Jesus has just told the story of a man who is in a favored position of wealth, power, and prominence, and he's getting ready to be cast out. And the Pharisees are going, whoa, 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 whoa. No, absolutely not. You just can't say things like that. Because they believed that wealth and power and position assured you that kind of power in the kingdom to come. And what does Jesus immediately do? He tells the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Here's the rich man with power, with influence, with money, dressed in purple. Oh my goodness gracious. That within itself tells us how wealthy he was. And in fine linen. But guess what? None of that helped him in the judgment that was about to be rendered. So, even if we take the position, as I do at this time, that the story of the rich man and Lazarus was a parable, it tells us of a story of the great role reversals that were about to take place in the imminent judgment of those who were in the positions of power, prominence, and popularity. Those leaders of Old Covenant Israel, who lorded it over Israel, were about to be judged and cast out. We've got much more to say on the rich man and Lazarus. You don't want to miss it, but don't forget, go to my website, order my 32 lesson, actually there's more than that, but order my series on the parables of Jesus, eschatology.org or bibleprophecy.com. Mention that you saw the offer on YouTube and Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping and save you $5. Yes, indeed, we've got more on the story of the rich man and Lazarus, and you don't want to miss it, so we'll see you on the flip side.